Welcome to the Parables, the hidden messages of Jesus, God's Messiah. This is a study on how to unlock and understand the parables. This is video 1 on the Matthew 7 parables, the narrow and wide gates, the true and false prophets, the wise and foolish builders. So going back to the introduction video, we're talking about the four senses or the four dimensions of a biblical parable. We have to first read and understand the literal, the way that it is just written, no translation required, the verbatim text of the message. And then we have to understand that each object and subject in the literal message is symbolic, it's allegorical. And there is the literal is an encrypted message that is unencrypted by understanding the allegorical, which will unlock the homiletical or the moral of the message. And then it can speak to us on the deeper personal level. This is the sense of it speaking, God speaking directly to our hearts. And so with that, let's get into it. So in the introduction, I mentioned that these parables need to be put in context, you see, because I see that Matthew 7, even though the NIV Bible that I am copying this from is separating these parables from the narrow and wide gates, true and false prophets, and the wise and foolish builders. But I believe that it is one continuous message that Jesus is telling us. It isn't a separate thing. These aren't separate topics pulled apart. So keeping everything in context, that Matthew 7 of where these parables are existing, we have to look all the way back to Matthew 5, where we're talking about an introduction to the Sermon of the Mount, the Beatitudes, and so on. He was laying down a huge message here of wisdom and understanding and correction and realignment, that he was, I think in some cases that the rulers of the, or the teachers of the law in his day was misinterpreting things for their benefit. They were being hypocritical, and they were misinterpreting scripture for corrupt purposes. And so he comes back with the Sermon on the Mount, and he corrects some of this instruction regarding murder and adultery and divorce and oaths. This is the doctrines of God that's being established here. So these are the teachings that are being talked about in these parables in Matthew 7, giving to the needy, prayer, the fasting, treasures in heaven, do not worry. These are all nuggets of wisdom and truth, that this is the narrow path that will lead to the small door, if I'm saying that right. And so the small is the gate and narrow the road. That is the preceding passages from Matthew 5 to here is the instruction that leads to life, and only few find it. So these parables are reinforcing what he was saying in the passages that came before this. So in Matthew 7, then I think we should ignore these titles and just read the entire thing as one. So enter through the narrow gate, For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow that road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law. So what was Jesus saying here with all this symbology of gates and fruit and trees and so on? So let's see if we can unlock that and with the allegorical keys. We can see that the wide gate and the broad is the road, is the many ideas of the world, the sinful lifestyle apart from God. The narrow gate and narrow the road is a life following the way of Jesus, keeping the commandments and a repentant lifestyle, respecting the laws of God. And that's always a harsh way of saying it, respecting the laws of God, but more so respecting the wisdom and knowledge of God, that he gives us this understanding of how to navigate this world. The sheep's clothing is deception and lies. The wolves are false prophets, deceitful people using and abusing others for their own gain. The good tree, the good fruit. The good fruit are the actions and good deeds, the product of love. The tree is the person who is producing good deeds. The bad tree, the bad fruit, is the bad fruit are the actions and bad deeds, the product of hate or lovelessness, and the bad tree is the person who is producing loveless acts. The fire, the final judgment, is the lake of fire, as referenced in Revelation 20:14. A house is your life doctrines, how you run your household or your home or your family. The rock is the sound doctrines of God. The rain and the wind are the trials of life, and the sand is the ways of the world or the ways counter to God. So going back to the parable, it's basically saying walk the way to heaven, the way to the paradise, the way to redemption is to follow the commandments and follow the instruction of Jesus, and that will lead to a good life. But beware that there are false teachers, there's false prophets, there are deceitful people that will come at you pretending to be good, good people giving you a good message, but they are not, they're being deceitful. And Jesus is telling us that don't listen to what they're saying, watch what they do, because it doesn't matter what they say, it's the outcome of their life, it's the consequences of these things, and that will tell the truth, and that's how we'll recognize them by what they do, not by what they say. So, and then he continues to say that, if you put what I'm saying to heart, and you put your life, you live your life according to these things that I just told you. And he's going back to the Beatitudes, all the way back to Matthew 5 and the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying, put all these things into practice. Don't murder, adultery, all the things that we saw in the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying, put these things into action in your life. And doing so, you're going to withstand these trials and tribulations that come against us on a day-to-day basis in this life, where it doesn't matter what comes our way. If you put the foundations of your life on these teachings, then you're going to withstand, and you'll make it to the narrow gate, doing the narrow path. That's what he's saying here. On the contrary, that if those who don't listen and don't put these things into practice and live a life of lying and adultery and the whole of foolishness that is contradictory to what he was teaching and the Beatitudes and so on, their lives will be constantly unwound. They'll find themselves constantly rebuilding their lives, problem after problem. So that's essentially what the parable is saying as a whole message. And I don't think we're supposed to break these out and just look at each one individually, but it's a complete package coming from Matthew 5 to 7, and this is reinforcing it all, saying put this into practice. So what's the homiletical message? There are many paths in life that we can choose to go down, and it is a choice. We can go our own way and forego any wisdom found in living a righteous life. A rider's life of bad decisions and actions will result in a bad outcome. The consequence of living opposed to God is a life headed for destruction. Placing one's life on the ways and ideas of the world will not overcome the problems, trials, and temptations when they come against us and overwhelm us in fear and desperation as it tears down the home we have tried to build. Again and again we rebuild, and again it all crumbles. We are misled by false worldly teachers, media, news, and entertainment who tell us the way of the world is right, and we are deceived into a sea of regret for not listening to the wisdom of the ways of Christ. Matthew 7, Jesus teaches us about a narrow path to life and a wide path that leads to destruction. There is truth and life in the narrow path, and it can be seen that those who walk this narrow path to life bear the good deeds of the outcome of good choices, decisions, and actions. Jesus teaches us that a prudent life of following the sound doctrines of God will be rewarded with strength and stamina as the problems of the world and the trials of life come against us, and our homes will stand until the end. Amen. So if I'm hearing this message, I'm hearing the homily that comes out of this parable that was hidden in trees and fruits and sand and rock, that all of that is interpreted, and it breaks down into this understanding that could be hidden if you're not seeking after it with a pure heart. So once we get those three senses and an understanding of those three senses, it should speak to us on the deepest personal level. And this is between you and God. It can't be translated by anybody else, and it requires honesty and careful inspection of your own heart and mind. When you hear these words, how did it speak to you? To me personally, how many of the chapters of my life ended into disparity? Ended in disparity and total destruction. How many times has my life reset and restarted from scratch? From divorce, failing at school, maybe losing a job, forced to move out to another home because of a breakup, a relationship that didn't work out. Did things fall apart because drug or alcohol addiction or dependency? How many victories have I had though? How many times have I been tempted and did not succumb? Do I have the strength to do this good tree life on my own and with my own ideas apart from God? That's the wide path. How many people have I helped with the strength of blessings I have been given with this life? Do I have a selfish life or a selfless life? Am I a tree that bears good fruit, or am I a tree that bears bad fruit? I need to be honest with myself. And as I was saying in the introduction video, is my intent is to reveal these things, to teach these things in honesty. And I am praying that these parables are being revealed and to lead you closer to Jesus and your relationship with God. That's my intent here. And if I am wrong, I am praying for God's rebuke. So that is the end of video 1, the Matthew 7 parables. So this is the end of video 1, the Matthew 7 parables. That it was the narrow and wide gates, the true and false prophets, and the wise and foolish builders. And just to say thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.